Whew. Hello, everybody. It's great to be back. Let's light up the darkness. I begin by apologizing after missing several days because we were on a family trip. I was late getting on. It was a technical difficulty. I was here, and it was a brand new problem. The power cord was not connecting to the computer, just not one I've ever experienced before. Took a few minutes to get sorted out, and I'm very sorry. I really try so hard to always be on time, and I'm very sorry that we were late. And especially since we're doing a double, and we're going to keep doing doubles until we get caught up. So, who's in the house on a Tuesday, Yom Shlishi? Keeping it moving. Joe in the Inland Empire, Bella in Florida, Joseph in Sierra Nevada, Nancy, North Carolina, Melissa in Great Night, Bell welcoming us back from Texas, Lucy in Minnesota, Shandor in the Bronx, Guy in Ohio, Yehud in South Carolina, Lorraine in Texas, Sharon in New Jersey, Karen in Northern California. Over on the YouTube side, Frank in San Pedro Franco in Italy, Chaim in Florida, Aoife in Florida, Ella in Southern California. Welcome, everybody. We are continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1, right? It's Mishna number 1 in chapter 2. Mishna, the long Mishna number 1 in chapter 2. And with God's help, tomorrow we'll complete chapter 2 and get back to the actual subject of our tractate, Shevuos, right, which is about oaths, right? When someone swears that's before God that he will do something or has done something or that something is true or has been true or will be true, oaths. We've been in a long digression because in our first Mishnah of the tractate, we learned that with regard to oaths, 2 become 4, and likewise this really unrelated area of the law, someone who becomes aware that he knew that he was tamei, had become into contact with ritual impurity, and then he forgot, and then he entered the holy temple. Or knew that he was tamei and continued that, remained knowing that, but didn't realize he was standing in the temple or ate of sacrificial foods, etc. It's another example of where 2 become 4. We spent all of chapter 1 essentially on this digression, and chapter 2 on related digressions. With God's help, tomorrow we'll get back to, in chapter 3, the actual laws of oaths. But we've still got some work to do here on Mishnah number 1. Today we'll do a double. We'll do pages 17 and 18 of Tractate Shevuos, the 26th volume of the Talmud. We got a good head start on page 17a last week. And so we picked this up a little more than halfway down, page 17a. Our Mishnah, right? Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 2. Taught, if at the time that one was unaware, either that he was tamei, ritually impure, or that he was standing in the holy temple when it was standing in Jerusalem, right? So if at the time that one was unaware, either that he was impure or that he was in the temple, he went out by way of a longer route when he could have taken a shorter route, then he becomes liable to bring the sliding scale offering. Now, the sliding scale offering is a type of sin offering. Sin offerings, we only brought them when the temple was standing, and we only brought them in situations where we committed a transgression unwittingly, right? If it was intentional, then you don't qualify for the sin offering. There's other ways to make an atonement, but not by bringing the sin offering. The sliding scale offering is a particular kind of sin offering, which is adjusted according to the economic circumstances of the person who commits this transgression. If he's poor, it's a less expensive offering. If he's wealthy, it's a more expensive offering. Okay. So if at the time that one was unaware, either that he was tamei or that he was standing in the temple, then when he became aware, he went out by way of a longer route when he should have taken a shorter route, then he's liable to bring the sliding scale offering. But if he left the temple via the shortest way, then he is exempt, right? When he realizes that he is tamei, oh my gosh, I gotta go. So if he takes the most direct route possible, and we're talking also maybe he became tamei while he was standing in the holy temple. Let's say someone dropped dead right next to him. Okay, so then he has to leave by the shortest route possible. And if he doesn't, then it's a transgression. But if he left the temple by the shortest way, he's exempt. Rava says, with regard to the short route, which the sages said here that he is exempt for this, this does not necessarily mean that he left the temple as quickly as possible, right? Just because you took the shortest route doesn't mean you left in the shortest amount of time that was possible for you. Because maybe he took the most direct route and he is exempt even if he walked with exceedingly small steps, heel to toe, even if it took him all day long. This is a very weird type of situation. In other words, it's a hypothetical. Why would a person who becomes aware that he is ritually impure while standing in the temple and he knows he has to leave by the shortest route, then sort of, quibble over the legalities of it and walk, heel toe, taking tiny steps, going as slowly as possible? It's not like a person would really do that. But if he did that, since he took the most direct route, he would be exempt, even though he obviously lingered in the temple for a much longer amount of time, because he would still qualify for the exemption, because what did he do? He walked along the shortest route. Now, Rava raised a dilemma. What is the law with regard to combining periods of tarrying, each of which is less than the amount of time necessary to recite the second portion of the verse mentioned above? Right, now, one thing is taking the shortest route. Another is, how long did you stay before you started heading out? If you stayed for as much time as would be necessary to recite the verse about bowing in the temple, then you tarried too long and you have committed the transgression of being there beyond the amount. Like if you become aware that you're tamei and you have to leave, well, you have to get going right away. So what is the minimum amount of time necessary that would qualify you as a transgressor, who committed the sin of staying while he was tamei? The amount of time necessary to recite that verse, right? Well, now they're asking a question, very technical type of question. Okay, well, he got himself moving in less amount of time than it would take to recite that verse. But then he paused 2 steps later. For how long? Less than the amount of time it would take to recite that verse. But if you took those 2 pauses and added them together, it would be longer than that amount of time. So do we add those pauses together? That's going to be the question they ask. If an impure person tarried in the temple for less than the amount of time needed to bow down, and then he started to leave, and then he tarried again for less than the amount of time needed to bow down or to recite the verse about bowing down, do those 2 periods of tarrying combine together so that if he tarried in total long enough to bow down, he is liable? And the Gemara challenges, let Rava resolve his dilemma from his own statement with regard to one who left the temple with small steps, heel to toe, as such a person tarries intermittently between steps. So the Gemara answers, right, overall, he's going to be there much longer than the amount of time needed to bow, and yet we say that he is exempt from that transgression because he's walking on the shortest route. So the Gemara answers, well, there, Rava is referring to one who did not tarry at all, because he is walking continuously. Maybe it was a very long, slow walk, because it's just very, intentional, almost slow motion walking, but he's always walking. He never paused. So we can't use the fact that it took him a long time to leave while steadily walking very slowly to answer the question of can we add together pauses that each of the pauses themselves is not long enough to trigger the liability for tarrying, but do we add them up? We can't answer that question from Rava's ruling about walking slowly along the shortest route. Abaye raised a dilemma to Rava that is the very opposite of the dilemma raised by Rava. If the impure person quickly went out by the longer way in the measure of time ordinarily needed to go out the shortest way. This guy didn't take the shortest route. He took a longer route, but he ran. So the guy who ran along the long route is going to get out way before the guy who walked in slow motion along the short route. So do we say, since in effect he got out there much quicker, that he is exempt from liability? Or do we say, since he didn't take the shortest route and the law is defined according to taking the shortest route, that he is liable? If he went out the longer route, if he quickly went out along the longer way, in the measure of time ordinarily needed to go out the shortest way, then what is the law? Is it learned as a tradition that he is liable for tarrying for a certain measure of time? And if he went out the longer way, but running in the measure of time ordinarily needed to go out the shortest way, then he is exempt. Or perhaps it is learned as a tradition specifically that if he left the longer way, he is liable no matter how fast he went. Whereas if he had gone by the shortest way, he would be exempt. Rabba said to Abaye, the liability for leaving using the longer way was not given so that it would be overridden for him, i.e., he is liable if he exits via the longer way, even if he runs. Rabbi Zera objects to this, but as for this law that we maintain that an impure priest, right? Now we haven't necessarily been talking about a priest, just any Jew who becomes tamei while standing in the temple or becomes aware that he is tamei. Now let's talk about a priest. But as for this law that we maintain that an impure priest, right, a Kohen who becomes tamei, and who intentionally served in the temple is liable to death at the hand of heaven, right? A priest, a Kohen, when the temple is standing and he's there to do the avoda, right, the work of the priests in the holy temple, bringing offerings, etc., he may not do that when he is tamei. If he knowingly does the avoda while tamei, then he is liable to death at the hands of heaven. So now Rabbi Zera is going to really parse the law very carefully in light of what we just said about walking in slow motion along the shortest route or running along the long route. Right? So, but as for this law that we maintain, that an impure priest who intentionally served in the temple is liable to receive death at the hand of heaven, how can you ever find such circumstances? If he did not tarry in the temple long enough to bow down, how could he have performed any service in such a short amount of time? And if he tarried long enough to bow down, he is liable to be punished with tzaraas, which is a more severe punishment than death at the hand of heaven. Now, when I read that, I was a little alarmed because I think I've often been saying that when it says tzaraas, you can translate that as death at the hands of heaven. But tzaraas is one that we're not sure exactly what it is, right? It's excision. It might mean loss of olam haba, right? It might mean that you're losing something greater than just dying prematurely. It might also mean that you die childless or that your children predecease you. It could mean something worse than death at the hands of heaven, or it could mean death at the hands of heaven. That's one of the interpretations. So tzaraas, because there's these other possibilities, is considered worse, right? A stiffer punishment than death at the hand of heaven. So what he's saying is, if a priest serves in the temple knowingly while tamei, his punishment is tzaraas, not death at the hands of heaven. So why do we have a Mishna that says his punishment is death at the hands of heaven? That should never be. It should be kares. So Rabbi Zeir now explains his objection. So granted, if you say that it is learned as a tradition that one is liable for tarrying for a certain measure of time, and he did not tarry for the time it takes to bow down and leave the temple by the shortest way, he is exempt, then you can find a case where the priest could have served in a state of impurity without becoming liable to be punished with kares. That case is where he exerted himself and he ran out very quickly via the shortest way after having performed a service in a state of impurity, so that the total time that he was in the temple was less time than it would ordinarily take for him to bow and leave the shortest way. In such a case, he's exempt from being punished with kares and liable only to be punished with death at the hand of heaven for having performed the temple service while tamei. Now on page 17b. But if you say that it is learned as a tradition specifically, that if a tamei person tarries long enough to bow down, he is liable even if he does not exceed the time required to go out the shortest way, then how could you find such circumstances? So Abaye says, what are you talking about? What's the difficulty? You can find it in a case such as where he went out from the temple via the shortest way, but as he was leaving, he turned over one of the limbs of an offering on the altar, on the burning, right, that's burning on the altar fire, with a fork. Right? This is some kind of a utensil that you would use to essentially stir the coals, or move around an offering that is being consumed on the fires of the altar. Think about it like a little, pitchfork that you would use in a fireplace, but here it's being used on the altar. Now, this is an action that takes only a brief moment to perform, but it is still considered an avoda, part of the priestly service, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Huna. Because Rav Huna says a non-priest who turns over part of an offering on the altar with such a fork is liable to receive the death penalty because he engaged in temple service that is restricted to priests. So that's considered part of the avoda, is just turning an offering over that's already burning on the fire. So the Gemara proceeds to analyze the matter itself. Rav Huna says a non-priest, right? A Yisrael, a regular Jew, a non-priest, could be a Levite also. Only priests are allowed to do any of the avoda. A non-priest who turns over part of an offering on the altar with a fork is liable to receive the death penalty. What are the circumstances of such a case? If in the event that he had not turned it over, the offering would not have been consumed by the fire, then it is obvious that the non-priest is liable, as he performed the service of burning the offering on the altar. And if in the event that he had not turned it over, it would still have been consumed by the fire, then what service did he perform? Even without his action, the offering would have been burned. So the Gemara answers, no, it is necessary for Rav Huna to state this law with regard to a case where, had the non-priest not turned it over, it would have been consumed by the fire in 2 hours. But now that he did turn it over, it is consumed by the fire in 1 hour. Right? When you stir a fire, it'll, the fuel in the fire will burn faster. So if somebody caused one of the offerings, some animal that's part of, let's say, an olah, right, an elevation offering that is entirely consumed on the altar. So the parts of that animal are on the altar fire, and he stirs it. Now it's going to burn faster. So then he participated in the avodah, in the temple service, by stirring the coals and the piece of animal that is on the altar. And so Rav Huna is teaching us this, that any act that accelerates the service, causing it to be performed more quickly, is itself considered part of the service. So now we return to the general topic of one who enters the temple while in a state of ritual impurity. Right? So we got past this, very, very technical idea of comparing one who runs going along the longer route versus one who creeps along the shortest route. Now we're going to something a little bit different. The Gemara returns to the general topic of one who enters the temple while tamei, citing Rabbi Oshaya, who said, I wish to say something, but I am afraid of my colleagues. I am afraid that they will raise an objection against me. What did he want to say? With regard to one who enters a house afflicted with tzaraas, right? So tzaraas, when it appears on the skin, that is a physical expression of a spiritual malady. Tzaraas can also appear on garments or on the walls of a house. When it appears on the walls of a house and a priest comes and says, yes, that is tzaraas, right? Then that house, I think it can be quarantined for a time to see if it goes away. And if it doesn't go away, they have to tear down the house. But what's important here is that everything that is in the house becomes tamei. So all the furnishings, the furniture, etc. So when you see spots in a wall, before the priest comes and declares the house has tzaraas, you remove everything from inside the house so that it won't all become tamei. That includes people who are standing in that house when the priest says it is tamei. Those people become tamei. Okay, what's the relevance here? With regard to one who enters, right, a person who walks into a house that has been deemed to have tzaraas, if he enters the house backward, meaning he's walking backward, then even if his entire body entered except for his nose, which remained outside the house, he remains tahor, pure. He does not become tamei. Why? As it is written, he that enters into the house all the time that it is shut up shall be tamei until evening, from Leviticus 14:46, teaching that the Torah prohibited, i.e. conferred impurity, only with regard to the normal manner of entering into a house, i.e. face first. So someone who enters in this weird way, it's like he didn't really enter the house. He didn't perform the act of entering. Says Rabbi Oshaya, but I am afraid of my colleagues, as they might raise the following objection. If so, that the impurity depends on the person entering the house in the normal manner, face first, then even if his entire body entered the house, he would also remain pure, as he did not go into the house in the normal fashion. Right? So the question is, we can agree that if he entered all of his body except for his nose, but he backed into the house, that's not the normal way of entering. Some of him remained outside, even if it's only his nose, so he never became tamei. Okay, what if he backed into the house, but now he's fully standing in the middle of the room? Are we going to say also that he did not become tamei because when he entered, he backed in, but now he's fully inside the house and he doesn't become tamei? Rava said, no, this is not difficult. As if his entire body entered in this manner, he is impure, because he is no worse now, i.e. this law should be no more lenient than vessels that are in the house which become impure, as it is written, and they shall empty the house, so that all that is in the house shall not be made impure. Leviticus 14:36. Once something is fully in the house, if that house is tamei with tzaraas, it becomes impure. So it doesn't really matter how you entered. If you're fully inside a house that's tamei, you become tamei. But if you did not complete the act of entering, and you backed in, so it wasn't entering at all, so then we hold like Rabbi Oshaya. We do follow Rabbi Oshaya in this. And the Gemara comments, this is also taught in a Baraisa, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Oshaya, that wherever entering is mentioned in the Torah, the reference is to the normal manner of entering. With regard to those roofs that covered the various chambers found in the temple courtyard, offerings of the most sacred order may not be eaten there, on them, and offerings of lesser sanctity may not be slaughtered there, because those roofs do not have the sanctity of the temple courtyard. Things that can only be eaten in the temple courtyard, can only be slaughtered in the temple courtyard. You can't do that action up on the roof because the roof doesn't have the sanctity of the temple courtyard. And a ritually impure person, a person who's tamei, and who enters the sanctuary via those roofs is exempt, as it is stated with regard to a woman who became tamei, and she shall not enter into the sanctuary. Leviticus 12:4, teaching that the Torah prohibited only the normal manner of entering the temple. And so too in the case of houses afflicted with tzaraas, where mention is made of the concept of entering, only one who enters into the house in the normal manner becomes tamei, as stated by Rabbi Oshaya. Although if he enters completely, now he's in the house. Doesn't matter that he entered. in a way that wasn't entering. He's now in the house, so he becomes tamei. New subject. The Mishnah taught this mitzvah that the tamei person has to be sent out of the temple is the positive mitzvah, right? Thou shalt, as opposed to a negative commandment, thou shalt not. It's the positive mitzvah concerning the temple for which the Sanhedrin is not liable to bring a bull offering for an erroneous ruling. If the Sanhedrin passes an erroneous ruling that leads people to commit a transgression, then the members of the Sanhedrin have to bring a bull offering for passing this erroneous ruling that led the population to transgress. But they don't have to do it if they make an erroneous ruling with regard to the positive commandment of sending someone out who becomes tamei or realizes he's tamei while standing in the temple. Why would if they made an erroneous ruling with regard to this area of the law, why would they not have to bring the bull offering? Because this area of the law, as we've seen, is subject to, if the person does it unwittingly, bringing the sliding scale sin offering, and erroneous rulings of the Sanhedrin where they have to bring the bull offering are erroneous rulings that have to do with, if there's a transgression, they would have to bring the regular sin offering, not the sliding scale offering. That's why this doesn't come under that rubric. Right. The Gemara asks, to what does the Tana of this Mishnah refer when he says this is the positive mitzvah concerning the temple for which the Sanhedrin is not liable to bring a bull offering if they make an erroneous ruling? Where was it taught that there is such a commandment for which they are not liable? And the Gemara answers, he's referring to a Mishnah found there in Tractate Horayos on page 8b, which teaches the Sanhedrin is not liable to bring a bull offering for an erroneous ruling with regard to a positive commandment or prohibition concerning tumah, ritual impurity, in the holy temple itself, as this offering is brought only for an erroneous ruling on a matter whose unwitting violation requires the bringing of a fixed sin offering, the regular sin offering, but not if it requires bringing a sliding scale sin offering. Now the Mishnah there in Horayos continues, and one who is uncertain whether or not he unwittingly transgressed a prohibition that requires a sin offering does not bring the provisional guilt offering, known as the asham, for a positive commandment or prohibition concerning tumah in the temple, as this offering is brought only when certainty about the unwitting transgression would require a fixed sin offering, not a sliding scale offering. Unwitting transgression of a commandment concerning tumah in the temple results in an obligation to bring a sliding scale offering, and therefore these other laws don't apply to it. The Mishnah there in Horayos continues, but the Sanhedrin is liable to bring a bull offering for an erroneous ruling with regard to a positive mitzvah or prohibition concerning a niddah, a menstruating woman, where if a person commits an unwitting transgression, he would have to bring a fixed sin offering, not a sliding scale sin offering. And one who is uncertain whether or not he unwittingly transgressed a prohibition that requires a sin offering brings the asham, the provisional guilt offering, for the positive mitzvah or the prohibition concerning a niddah. And it is in reference to that Mishnah that the Tana in the Mishnah here says this mitzvah, that the ritually impure, that the tamei must be sent out of the temple, is the positive mitzvah concerning the temple for which the Sanhedrin is not liable to bring a bull offering for an erroneous ruling, and which is the positive mitzvah with regard to a niddah, a menstruating woman, for which the Sanhedrin would be liable to bring a bull offering if they made an erroneous ruling. It is this law that we are now going to revisit. We talked a little bit about when we first read the Mishnah. If a man was engaging in intercourse with a ritually pure woman, she's not menstruating, she's not a niddah, she's his wife, they are permitted to have marital relations. But during the course of their marital relations, she experienced menstrual bleeding, and she said to him, I have become tamei. And unwittingly, he immediately withdrew from her and did not wait until his member had become flaccid. So then he is liable to bring a sin offering for engaging in intercourse with a niddah unwittingly, because his withdrawal from her is as pleasant to him as his entry. In other words, if she becomes a niddah while they're having sex, that circumstance is beyond his control. There's no transgression at all just for being in the act. But once he realizes that he is having sex with a woman who's a niddah, he has to stop it, right? He has to stop that. But he can't pull out immediately because the act of pulling out is like the act of entering, right? What is sex? It's in, out, in, out. And that causes pleasure to both him and her. So he can't enjoy pleasure from the sexual act anymore once he realizes that she's a niddah. He has to freeze, do long division in his mind, or think about the fact that he's committing a transgression, which is a very serious transgression, until he becomes not aroused anymore. He becomes flaccid, and then he pulls out. That pulling out then will not, be an act of sex because it's no longer giving pleasure now that he's not aroused. So if he didn't wait, right, because he didn't know that he's supposed to wait, or he didn't think about it, it was unwitting, he didn't do that on purpose, but he pulled out right away. So that's why he becomes liable to bring the sin offering for the unwitting transgression of having sexual relations with a niddah. Now, the Gemara, and if the Sanhedrin made a mistaken ruling with regard to this area of the law, then they would bring the bull offering for the mistaken ruling, because this is the type of transgression that does result in a sin offering if somebody did it unwittingly. Now, the Gemara further clarifies the matter of a man who immediately withdrew from the woman after she told him that she had experienced menstrual bleeding. It was stated that Abaye says in the name of Rabbi Chia bar Rav, he is liable to bring 2 sin offerings for his unwitting transgression. And so Rava says that Rav Shmuel bar Shaba says that Rav Huna says he is liable to bring 2 sin offerings, one for his initial entry and one for his immediate withdrawal. So Rava discusses this matter and raises a question. About what case are we speaking? If we say that it was near her expected date of menstruation, when sexual intercourse is prohibited due to a concern that the woman might already be menstruating or that she might begin to menstruate during the act of intercourse, and nevertheless they engage in intercourse, then there is a difficulty, right? I said before that if they were having permitted relations and then she said, hey, my period started, that circumstance is beyond his control. But if they were having marital relations too close to the time where she expected to start having her period, then it wasn't circumstances beyond his control. Then he was, playing with fire, so to speak. And so this would not be considered beyond his control. It wasn't intentional, but once he realizes that she's menstruating, it was an unwitting transgression, not circumstances beyond his control and no transgression at all. So here, if they did it too close to the time, and what is too close to the time? There's actually imagine that there's multiple opinions on this. Some say that if it's on the day when she expects to start menstruating, then from that morning, they can no longer do it. Or if she expects to start that night, then from when that nightfall begins, that's when they have to stop. And some say they have to stop the day before. So, it's anywhere from 12 to anywhere from a few hours to half a day before that they need to no longer have relations because they're too close to the time when her period is expected. Now, if they are doing it too close to that time, now we're going to look at 2 cases. One, the Torah scholar who knows what the law, and the other, the Am Haaretz, who doesn't know the law. Right? So if we're talking about they did it too close to the time of her expected menses, then with whom are we dealing? If we say that we are dealing with a Torah scholar, granted that he will be liable to bring a sin offering for his initial entry, that was an unwitting transgression because he thought to himself, I can engage in intercourse with her before she begins to menstruate, but he cut it too close. He knew that he was, legally speaking, too close. But why will he be liable to bring a sin offering for his immediate withdrawal? That transgression was not unwitting. It was intentional, since he is a Torah scholar and he knows that in such a case he must not withdraw immediately. and therefore a sin offering would not apply because it was an intentional transgression, and sin offerings only apply for unwitting violation. Now we're on page 18a. And if we say we're dealing with an am ha'aretz, an ignorant person who doesn't know Torah law, who specifically does not know that it is prohibited for him to engage in intercourse with a woman near the expected onset of her menstruation, and he also does not know that it is prohibited for him to withdraw immediately from her if she experiences menstrual bleeding during intercourse, then for both this and that, his entry and his withdrawal, he should be liable to bring only a single sin offering, since he had no awareness of his transgression between his two actions. This is like one who ate 2 olive bulks of forbidden fat in the course of one lapse of awareness, and is therefore liable to bring only one sin offering. Here too, although he performed 2 actions for which one could be liable to bring sin offerings, entry and withdrawal, there was only one lapse of awareness because he never knew anything other than that he didn't know that this was no good, and so it was both cases unwitting. Now, rather, in one lapse of awareness. So rather, it must be a case where it was not near her expected date of menstruation, and there was no reason for the man to think that the woman would experience menstrual bleeding. Her period came much earlier than either of them expected. And with whom are we then dealing? If we say that we're dealing with a Torah scholar, well, then he should not be liable to bring even one sin offering, because with regard to his initial entry, he was a victim of circumstances beyond his control. And with regard to his withdrawal, after he knew that she was a menstruating woman, his transgression was intentional if he pulled out immediately, because he should have known better. And so therefore he would be liable to receive kares for that, not to bring a sin offering. So it was beyond his control at entry, no sin offering for that. And it was intentional withdrawal it was intentional transgression when he pulled out quickly. So sin offering doesn't apply to that. So no sin offerings. And if we are dealing with an am ha'aretz, he should be liable to bring only one sin offering for his immediate withdrawal, which he didn't know was prohibited, and it was circumstances beyond his control, so sin offering wouldn't apply to that. So it should be only one sin offering. So what are the circumstances where a person would bring 2 sin offerings? Rava reconsidered and then said, actually, it is a case where it was near the expected date of the woman's menstruation, and we are dealing with a Torah scholar. But he is a Torah scholar only with regard to this law, that it is prohibited to engage in intercourse with a woman near the expected onset of her menstruation, and he erred in thinking that he could complete the act of intercourse before she experienced menstrual bleeding. So he knew he wasn't supposed to do it at that time, but it's not that you are liable to bring a sin offering for violating that. That's a rabbinic prohibition, that you shouldn't do it so soon. He thought that he wasn't that close. He thought he would get away with it. That's why it was an unwitting violation. We find out that she actually is menstruating. He finds out while they're doing it. Therefore, once he learns that she has experienced menstrual bleeding, he is liable to bring a sin offering for his unwitting transgression at the time of his entry. But he is not a Torah scholar with regard to that law, that it is prohibited for one to immediately withdraw from a woman if she experiences menstrual bleeding during intercourse. He didn't know that law. He might be a Torah scholar, but he's not a Torah scholar in every area of the law. He didn't know that you're supposed to withdraw immediately. So that's why he made an unwitting transgression on exit, right? On withdrawal. Rava said, and we learned both of these matters for which he is liable to bring a sin offering. We learn about entry and we learn about withdrawal. Rava now clarifies the matter. We learn about withdrawal, as the Mishna teaches, if a man was engaging in intercourse with a woman who's tahor, ritually pure, and during the course of their active intercourse, she experienced menstrual bleeding and said to him, I have become tamei, and unwittingly he immediately withdrew from her, then he's liable to bring the sin offering for engaging in intercourse with a menstruating woman, as we've discussed. And we learn about entry, the act of entry as triggering a sin offering. We learn about that in a Mishna tractate Niddah, page 14a. If a spot of blood is found on his rag, i.e. the rag that he uses to wipe his penis after intercourse, then it is clear that this blood came from the woman during their active intercourse. Consequently, both the man and the woman are impure, and they are liable to bring a sin offering for their unwitting transgression. She didn't feel it. She didn't realize that she became tamei while they were doing it. The act ended, And only then did they realize that she had her period had had set in while they were having intercourse. So Rav explains, and what? Is it not the case that the Mishnah speaks here of one who engaged in intercourse with a woman near the expected date of her menstruation, and it teaches that he is liable to bring a sin offering for his initial entry at that time. Rav Ada bar Matana said to Rava, actually, I could say to you that the Mishnah speaks here of one who engaged in intercourse with a woman not near the expected date of her menstruation, and he is liable to bring a sin offering for his immediate withdrawal upon learning that she had experienced menstrual bleeding. And if you would say, why do I need to be taught once again about withdrawal? Didn't the Tana already teach this in the Mishnah here? Well, one can respond, it was necessary to teach us this, i.e. the continuation of the Mishnah tractate niddah, which states if a spot of blood is found on a rag, i.e. the rag that she uses to wipe herself after intercourse, they are tamei only because of an uncertainty, as perhaps the bleeding commenced only after they completed their act of intercourse, and therefore they are exempt from bringing a sin offering. And since the Mishnah had to teach the case where the blood was found on her rag, it also taught the case where it was found on his rag, even though there is no novel element in this ruling. Ravina said to Rav Ada, can you really interpret that Mishnah as referring to a case where it was not near the expected date of the woman's menstruation, and that he is liable to bring a sin offering for his withdrawal without waiting to become flaccid? But isn't it taught in that Mishnah if blood is found on his rag? And these words indicate that the blood was found only afterward, after the man had already withdrawn from the woman. And that is to say, only after he withdrew from the woman, he learned that she had experienced menstruation earlier. And Ravina clarifies the difficulty. And if the Mishnah is referring to a case where he is liable for his withdrawal at the outset, when he withdrew from the woman, it was from then that he had knowledge of her menstrual status, as he withdrew because she had informed him that she had experienced bleeding. Of what significance is his finding blood on her rag? He already knew that she was menstruating. Finding blood on the rag indicates that he only found out when he saw the rag. She never told him anything. She didn't know. Rava said to Ravada, listen to what your teacher Ravina is saying, as he has already explained the matter. As he has now explained the matter. And Ravada said to Rava, how can I listen to his words and accept his explanation? As it is taught in a Baraisa with regard to this Mishnah concerning blood found on a rag, this is the positive mitzvah with regard to a menstruating woman for which one is liable. And Ravad explains, and if it is so that the Mishnah is referring to a case where the man is liable for his initial entry, this wording is difficult, as engaging in intercourse with a menstruating woman is not the violation of a positive mitzvah, but rather of a prohibition. You shall not have relations with a woman during the time of her menstruation. That's a prohibition, a thou shalt not. When is it become a thou shalt? To withdraw when you realize you're having it. Rava said to him, if you learn this Baraisa in this manner, its wording is not precise, as it is missing words, and you should teach it like this. When blood is found on the man's rag, this is the prohibition with regard to a menstruating woman for which one is liable. And additionally, if a man was engaging in intercourse with a ritually pure woman, and during the course of their active intercourse she experienced menstrual bleeding and said to him, I've become impure, and unwittingly he immediately withdraw from her, he is liable to bring a sin offering for that act. And what kind of commandment are we talking about here? The positive mitzvah, for which one is liable with regard to a menstruating woman. And what is that? If you find out that she's menstruating while you're already engaged in intercourse, you have to withdraw, but you can't withdraw until it will not cause further pleasure. That's why you have to wait until the arousal goes away. So the Gemara resumes its discussion of the Mishnah. Our Mishnah here in Tractate Shevuos. The master said above in the Mishnah, if he immediately withdrew from the woman after having been informed that she had experienced menstrual bleeding, he is liable to bring a sin offering for engaging in intercourse with a menstruating woman, as we explained. And the Gemara asks, what should one do in such a situation? Right, to make sure you become flaccid as quickly as possible. What should you do? Rav Huna said in the name of Rava, he should press his 10 fingernails into the ground, in other words, the bed, the surface beneath them, and restrain himself and do nothing until his penis becomes flaccid, and only then should he withdraw, and it is good for him to do this. Rava said, and that is to say, one who engages in intercourse with a flaccid penis, with those with whom relations are forbidden, is exempt. Right? Now we're saying, well, if by waiting until he's flaccid and withdrawing, we do not consider that an act of intercourse, right? Further intercourse with the woman once he realizes that she's menstruating, then are we also going to say that one who has, some kind of sex with a woman that's prohibited to him, but the act was performed with his flaccid member, therefore we say they didn't have sex? Are we going to say that, right? If waiting till you're flaccid to withdraw exempts you from liability, as we've discussed, then are we further going to say that one who, inserts his flaccid member into a woman who's prohibited to him didn't actually commit a sin because it was flaccid? Are we going to go that far? As if it enters your mind to say that he would be liable for such an act, here in the Mishnah, what is the reason that he is exempt if he waits and withdraws only later after he has lost his erection? Now, you might say that it is because he is a victim of circumstances beyond his control, in that the woman experienced menstrual bleeding while he was in the middle of the act of intercourse, and not because he would withdraw with a flaccid penis, as one who engages in intercourse with a flaccid penis would be liable. But if he is exempt from liability because he is a victim of circumstances beyond his control, then even if he withdraws immediately before losing his erection, he should still be exempt, for the same reason that he is a victim of circumstances beyond his control. So Abaye said to Rava, actually, I could say to you that one who engages in intercourse with a flaccid penis, with those with whom relations are forbidden to him, is liable. And here, what is the reason that one who waits and withdraws only later after he has lost his erection is exempt? It is because he is considered a victim of circumstances beyond his control in this situation. And concerning that which you said, why then is he liable if he withdrew immediately, i.e. when you said he should also be exempt, it is because he should have withdrawn with a flaccid penis and experienced little pleasure, but instead he withdrew with an erect organ and experienced great pleasure. He had an option to wait. If he doesn't exercise that option, that's why he becomes liable. If he exercises the option to wait, become flaccid, and withdraw, then he's not liable. Right? But one who inserts his flaccid member into a woman that is prohibited to him, that is a prohibited act, and he is liable for that. Rabba Bar Chanan said to Abaye, if so, according to your opinion, we find a difference in law between a long way and a short way with regard to a menstruating woman. If he withdrew the short way, meaning without waiting, he has committed a transgression. And if he withdrew the long way, i.e. after waiting for the erection to go down, then he has not committed a transgression. Right? That sums up what we've learned so far. Now we're on page 18b. And we learned this difference in the Mishnah, specifically with regard to ritual impurity in the temple. This was all by way of a comparison to one who realizes he's tamei while standing in the temple. He has to leave by the most direct way. For the menstruating woman, you can't leave the most direct way because that causes further pleasure and extends the act of intercourse. But one who realizes he's tamei while standing in the temple, he just has to get out, right? There's no extra pleasure by going quickly, so it's not the same case as the menstruating woman. He needs to leave the most direct way. And we learn this difference in the Mishnah, specifically with regard to Tuma in the temple. If such a distinction were also in effect with regard to a menstruating woman, the Mishnah would mention it. So rather, one can explain no parallel distinction is made because the two cases are not similar in their details. The long way here, with regard to a menstruating woman, namely that the man must wait, is like the shortest way there, with regard to realizing your tamei while standing in the holy temple. And the long way there, with regard to the temple, is like the shortest way here with regard to a menstruating woman. In other words, the cases are not analogous. They have specific conditions related to each that can't be compared to the other. Rab Huna, the son of Rab Nassan, objects to what Abaye said. Did Abaye really say with regard to the Mishnah that if the man withdraws with a flaccid penis, he is exempt because he is considered a victim of circumstances beyond his control? Apparently, then, we're speaking of a man who engaged in intercourse with a woman not near the expected date of her menstruation, and therefore the situation is considered beyond his control. But is it not Abaye who says that he is liable to bring 2 sin offerings for his transgression, one for his initial entry, which must mean that they were doing it too close to the time of her onset of menstruation, and another sin offering for his withdrawal, as we've been talking about. So apparently we're dealing with a man who engaged in intercourse with a woman near the expected date of her menstruation. So he is considered an unwitting transgressor who is liable to bring a sin offering and is not the victim of circumstances beyond his control. So consequently, Abaye's 2 statements contradict each other. And the Gemara answers, when this statement of Abaye was stated that the man is liable to bring 2 sin offerings, it was stated in general. It was not relating to the case in the Mishnah, but it was an independent ruling concerning one who engages in intercourse with a woman near the expected date of her menstruation. New subject. Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosei ben Lakonya asked Rabbi Shimon ben Yosei ben Lakonya, from where in the Torah is the prohibition concerning one who engages in intercourse with a menstruating woman derived? Rabbi Shimon ben Yosei ben Lakonya took a clod of earth and threw it at him in reproach and said to him, is there a need to search the Torah for a derivation for the prohibition concerning one who engages in intercourse with a niddah, a menstruating woman? The verse states, Leviticus 18:19, and a woman who is impure by her uncleanness, niddah, you shall not approach to uncover her nakedness. That's explicit. What do you mean derive? We don't need to derive. The Torah states it explicitly. The Gemara explains the intent of the question of Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosei ben Lakonya. Rather, from where do we derive the prohibition with regard to the case in the Mishnah concerning one who was engaging in intercourse with a woman who's tahor, ritually pure, and she experienced menstrual bleeding and said to him, I have become impure, that he must not withdraw immediately? In response to this question, Chizkiah said, the verse states, and if any man lies with her, and her menstrual flow shall be upon him. Teaching that even at any time when she is menstruating, the prohibition shall be upon him. Therefore, he must not withdraw from her immediately. He must withdraw, but not immediately, so that he is not furthering the act of intercourse, as we've said. The Gemara asks, we found a source for a positive mitzvah with regard to the manner in which one must withdraw from a menstruating woman. From where do we derive that immediate withdrawal is also subject to a prohibition? And Rav Papa said, the verse states, and a woman who is impure by her uncleanness, you shall not approach to uncover her nakedness. Leviticus 18:19. And the Gemara explains, you shall not approach, tikrav, means also the opposite. You shall not withdraw. As it is written, those who say withdraw, kerav, to yourself, come not near to me, for I am holier than you, in Isaiah 65:5, where the word kerav means remove or withdraw. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Having mentioned that, just getting ready for the are you kidding? I have to just sign in for the document that Nina passes me the questions in by opening my, yes, it's me, YouTube on my phone. Okay. Everything going wrong today. Okay, having mentioned that it is prohibited for a man to engage in intercourse with a woman near the expected date of her menstruation, the Gemara cites a baraisa in which the sages taught. The verse with regard to a menstruating woman states, and shall you separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, Leviticus 15:31. And Rabbi Yoshia says, from here we derive a prohibition to the children of Israel that they must separate from their wives near the expected date of their menstruation, right? Fence around the Torah. Make sure that you will not have intercourse with a niddah by not having intercourse even with a woman who is tahor, but her menses could arrive at any moment, right? That's why you have to separate at least, at the beginning of that night or that day when it's expected to begin, or some say even earlier than that. And we derive it in this way. And Rabbah said, and how long before they must separate? So Rabbah says a set interval of time for the tuma of a menstruating woman. And what is that? half of a 24-hour day, either the daytime or the nighttime. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, with regard to anyone who does not separate from his wife near the expected date of her menstruation, even if he has sons who are fit to be great and holy, like the sons of Aaron, the high priest, these sons will perish due to his sin. As it is written, and shall you separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness? This is the law of her that is sick with her menstrual flow, Leviticus 15:31-33, and it is stated near it after the death of the two sons of Aaron in Leviticus 16:1. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. And then Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, we don't rule that way. It sounds very harsh. Concerning this matter, Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says anyone who separates himself from his wife near the expected date of her menstruation will be rewarded with male children, as it is written, to distinguish between the impure and the pure. Leviticus 11:47. And it is stated near that, if a woman conceive and bear a male child. Leviticus 12:2. We don't like that way either, but these are very interesting derivations. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says he will have sons who are worthy of teaching law, halacha, as it is written, to distinguish between the impure and the pure, and to teach the children of Israel all the statutes. Leviticus 10:10 and 11. And the Gemara continues to expound these verses. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says anyone who recites Havdalah over wine at the conclusion of Shabbos and not over some other beverage will have male children, as it is written, to distinguish between the holy and the unholy, and between the impure and the pure, in Leviticus 10:10. And it is written there once again to distinguish between the impure and the pure, and it is stated near that in the Torah, if a woman conceive and bear a male child. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says anyone who recites Havdalah over wine at the conclusion of Shabbos will have sons who are worthy of teaching halachos, as it is written, to distinguish between the holy and the unholy, and to teach. Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefes says that Rabbi Lazar says anyone who sanctifies himself with modest conduct while engaging in sexual intercourse will have male children, as it is stated, you shall sanctify yourselves and you shall be holy, Leviticus 11:44. And it is stated near there, if a woman conceive and bear a male child. What does it mean to sanctify yourself while engaging in sexual intercourse? Although a man's wife is permitted to him, it is fitting for a Torah scholar to conduct himself with sanctity. And whoever does so not only sanctifies himself, purifies himself, and perfects his character, but he will also have modest sons who are fit to acquire wisdom and piety. So that's the reward for acting modestly. What does it mean to act modestly while having relations? A subject for another day, but it includes, doing it indoors with the lights off, etc. Okay, a few questions. Guy. No need to be apologetic, Sal. As long as we can anticipate your ministering on any given day, we can always wait. The words have endured the ages. They aren't going anywhere. If you're a little late with the technical difficulties. Thank you so much, Guy. I really appreciate that comment. Tom, is intention taken into account? Presumably Hashem knows every person's intentions at all times and in all things. If you run to get out as quickly as you can without thinking of the route, isn't that intention enough to deserve the exemption? Also, conversely, a priest should know better. Definitely intention counts and will be taken into account, let's say, when all of our deeds and all of the motivations behind our deeds are taken into account, because exactly, God knows everything. What we did, why we did it, when we did it. But in terms of the specific law, do you become liable to bring a sin offering for the unwitting transgression of a particular law? That's where the definitions do in fact matter. Yosef, with regards to tzaraas on a house, if the priest enters the house, would he risk becoming tamei? Well, what's interesting about that is, right, and it's explicitly stated in the Torah, that where we have a situation where a house is going to be deemed tamei, that first you should remove all the furniture from the house and all the possessions so that they not become tamei. And then the priest says that house is tamei. Now, obviously, those things were in the house before the priest, deemed it tamei because of the spots that were in the house. So the things were in the house with the spots on the walls. And yet, as the Torah tells us, by removing them before the priest makes his declaration, those objects, the furniture and other possessions, do not become tamei. So nothing becomes tamei, not the house nor the contents, until the priest says it's tamei. Based on what? His examination of the spots. All of which is to say, he will walk in the house, examine the spots. He doesn't want to make himself tamei. So what's he going to do? He's going to walk outside the house, and then he's going to say, that house is tamei. He's not tamei for having been inside. Nothing became tamei that was inside the house until the priest says it's tamei. He'll wait till he's outside. He'll wait till they removed all the contents. Then he'll issue that proclamation that the house is tamei. Chaim in Florida. General question. When someone brings a sin offering, I assume that can't be kept secret. It is known or witnessed by many. But is the nature of the particular sin disclosed or declared? Right? Why would we don't want people to be humiliated? That it would be known, what particular, their transgressions are their business. Why should it be known what it is that they did? Answer: it's not known by the onlookers. It's not even known by the priests. All they know is that this person is bringing a sin offering. Maybe his rabbi knows because he asked, I did this, I did that, the circumstances were like that. Am I liable to bring a sin offering? His rabbi says, yes, you are. And then he brings it. But at the temple, no. Lots of people were bringing sin offerings. Who knows what they're bringing it for? Might have been a very small transgression, might have been a big one. In all cases, though, if they're bringing sin offerings, it was for unwitting violations. So at most, it was like they could have been more careful. That's why it wasn't circumstances beyond their control, which would have made them exempt. It was like a little bit of negligence, but we have no idea what the particular sin offerings are for. And finally, Chaim in Florida. Seems like extra shame or embarrassment is unnecessary, or is that part of the punishment? And the answer is same answer, right? No. We try to minimize embarrassment and humiliation as much as possible. The only exception to that really is the case of the sota, the suspected adulteress. But she was warned, don't seclude yourself with that man. And then she secluded herself with that man. And it was at that point that the husband and wife became prohibited to each other. Now they can divorce. She doesn't have to go through the sota ritual. But if she chooses to go through with it, that will involve humiliation. And the humiliation is understood to be commensurate with putting herself in that unnecessarily suspicious situation, with the man that she was instructed not to seclude herself with, and in the presence of witnesses, etc. But that's the exception to the rule. Generally speaking, as we've read many places, you should prefer to jump into a fiery furnace than to humiliate or embarrass another person. And the law is structured in the same way. It always seeks to avoid embarrassment or humiliation, unless we're talking about like a murderer, right? Like we don't really care that he's embarrassed and humiliated by being marched out to his death sentence because he committed murder. That's what I've got for us today, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Wednesday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.